Guys, girls, ladies and gentlemen, it's BTC Gambler here. Listen, really quick one. In this video I'm going to be showing you how I calculate at the bust threshold. When does Alphaverse detect the bust? So if you don't know already, Alphaverse detects the bust by the balance amount, and it's set within the client config, and in the client config you're setting this figure called bust threshold, and it's that it's constantly checking. That number that you put in the bust threshold, if your balance goes below that figure, it will mark the bot as bust. So unfortunately it's as basic as that. It's no sophistication in the way that the bust works. It doesn't actually detect a bust, it's just checking the balance. So I'm going to show you how I do it, and I hope it's going to be useful to you. When you first do it, it's quite difficult. Don't worry too much, because you can only go 50% wrong here, and I'll explain why in a moment. In this simulation here, I've got the V6 of the Dragon Tower spreadsheet open, and I'm saying I've got a start balance of 170 TOX, and in the code I've said that every 20 TOX is going to vault it. So let me show you that. Okay, so here's the code. So this is version 10 of the Dicebot Dragon Tower Martingale. This is the one that was published in Discord, and it's the one that I recommend that you go with. So I'm whizzing around here, and the only bit we're really interested in here on the do bet function. So I've literally hard coded into this code the balance amounts that are allowed to be played within this. So in the code it's saying checking your balance. If it's above 190 TOX, it will vault whatever's remaining in your balance and leaves behind 170. So as I said before in the previous video, that is very good because that captures the recovery part, and also when you restart the bot it cleans everything up. So we know that we're going to be within a range because it's hard coded between 190 and 170, and so this is why the spreadsheet and the calculation of the bust threshold and the code go hand in hand. So the way I calculate it is, first and foremost, is to make sure there is no recovery pots in place, because we want to know when to bring in the recovery pot. With 170 start balance, you're going to go to -18 before it calls its first crash, and this is why I want to get to that, because this is going to be immensely stable. So what we're looking at, so this spreadsheet here is showing, in very simple terms, if we go right back to the beginning, it shows each subsequent bet on the seed. Okay, so, and it says what would the bet look like at each loss. So, and it starts off at 1, which is the base bet, which is 0.0003 of 1 TOX, and then it applies the multiplier, and the multiplier here is 104.2. Okay, and it does that all the way through until it gets to 6, and that's been hard coded. It's been hard coded in this script as well. That is that delayed martingale on the exact 5th minus loss streak. It goes in much higher than it would be if you just said times 2 or times 104.2. So it calculates the next bet, okay, until here and evermore. Right. Alongside that, it's keeping a tally of your current balance, so it's taking off the bet from the balance, so it will know when it can't do that. So like this check here, this is basically saying, is there enough balance? Here the balance is there. Is there enough balance in my account to produce the next bet? So in this one here it could, but this one here it can't. Yeah, so we know it is actually going to crash at 18. So just to be clear here, so you can land on -18, and if 18 wins, it will flag up that the loss streak is -17. Obviously if 18 loses, then it can't do the next bet of 19. So Yeah, so it stops at minus 18. So that makes sense. So that is what this does. So minus 18 would be the maximum loss streak. So that means you lost a minus 18, which means you're going on to the 19th bet and you don't have enough funds to do that. Just trust me, this is just the way it works. It will hang at 18 if 18 loses, and if 18 wins, you're good. So if the 18 bet loses, you get stuck there. It's unable to produce the 19th bet. Now, what we're looking at here in particular is what was the balance when it reached 18, and what was the balance before that. So what I tend to do is I make a note of those. So I'm going to, sometimes it can be very tight. So I'm going to make a note of those. I'm going to round these up to 9.1. And I'm going to round this up to 91.1. No, 91.2. Yep. So we've got our first two figures. We've got the figure what it was when it crashed, and we've got the figure there, the bet before it crashes. Because the last thing we want to do is change the bust threshold too early. Okay, so we know at 170 balance, we've got a huge range here. If I'd set the bust threshold to 10, 80, yeah, it would still detect a bust. So we've got this massive threshold to work with. So where it gets complicated though is that on the base bet, because we can go up to 190, those numbers are going to change, and this is where we need to keep an eye out on what the balance is going to be. And yeah, so this one isn't too bad. I've had it literally at decimal places. So this is now going to crash, and the balance will be 29.1 for example. And the one before that is 111.2. Now I'm going to color code these just so it's easy to see. So this is when it was at 170 balance, and this was when it was at 190. So this one is actually very easy to calculate out. There has been some where it's been impossible to do the calculation because it's not possible to find, like for example, let's do the maths, and I can show you where it can go wrong, and I'll tell you why you only need to worry about 50% of this, because it's not a big deal if you're 50% wrong. It's only a big deal if you're 100% wrong. Right. So because we know that the potential, we look at the highest figure here. The highest figure on 190 is 29.1. That will be the balance. Okay, and it will always be that because of the way we've coded it. Now I could set, for example, the bust threshold, for example, to 30 here. And let's just put that in for a moment. And we'll color code that as well. Let's give that a bright blue. Yeah. 30 as an example. So I know if I set the bust threshold to 30, it would cover both the 170 and the 190. So if the balance goes below that, which it would do in both of these instances, it's going to report a bust. And the important thing is that because the balance 30 is below both 91.2 and 111.12, it's not going to accidentally report a bust on the previous bet. Does that make sense? It won't report a bust because the balance will be at 91.2 on the previous bet on 170, and it'll be 111.2 on 190. So this one was very, very easy to calculate out. Now what I tend to do is be closer towards this number here to really give yourself quite a large range, and I think you would have been quite safe, for example, to even put this, say, like at 70, knowing, if something's not quiet, it's almost like a catch-all. Okay, as soon as the balance goes below 70, you you're below the previous bet on both 170 and 190, and you're definitely way above the bet on where the point where it does actually crash. So it will throw out a bust detected. So in this instance, you had a massive remit. You couldn't really have made a mistake. I would set that to 70, knowing very well that will capture every single bust. Okay, let's say we made a mistake. Let's say we absolutely made a mistake, and for some reason we set this to 110. Yeah. Even then, when the balance gets to 110, it's going to report a bust. 110 or less. So that means, let's say you did get it wrong on 170 balance, it means it's going to report a bust on minus 17. But then very quickly, if it did win, it would disappear. Or if it went on to lose again, you kind of got a bit of a head start. The worst that can happen here is it can just accidentally tip funds around to accounts that are not busted. So I know that's a ball ache. That probably it's not a big deal, but it's not a massive problem. The real problem comes is when you get the number too low and then it doesn't report a bust at all. So for example, if we set the bust balance to 9, for example, it's never going to reach 9. It would reach 9 point... Yeah, let's go back to 170. It would reach 9.06. That will not flag off a bust threshold. That account will replicate what the dice book glitch does and will attempt the same bet over and over again and using APIs, and the casino will be returning not enough funds. So, and it would just hang, and you get a bot that's stuck. So it's not good to get it too low. It's not great to get it too high, but it's not a game the show goes on, if you know what I mean. It's not, you don't have to be too precise. Now some slightly more advanced stuff. Let's say for example I went from 170 and I wanted to vault every 100 as an example. So we now have a huge problem because the crash threshold on a 270 is a whopping 109.1. There is no possible way. So I'll put these in here just so we can see them. And the one before that is 191.2. It's almost pointless putting that figure in there. And as you can see in this instance, it is impossible for me to dictate what the crash point is that is going to say I'm going to capture everything. And the only safest way I would do that, if I really wanted to do this, I'd change the recovery, the bust threshold to 110, for example. That does mean, if we go back to 170, it's going to report a minus 17, but like I say, it's not a big deal. But I don't personally like that, so I find the best way to do this is to have a very tight remit within the coding, so that I vault every 20 for this exact reason. If you're vaulting every 20, it's actually very easy to calculate the bust threshold. So let's go back to that. So we've got this clear in our mind. Once again, I will run through it once more. So when we started off at 170, the point where it crashes is 9.1. Okay, so I'd put a figure in there, 9.1, and the bet prior to that was 91.2. That makes sense. And then when we put it up to 190, the first one is 29.1 and the second one is 111.2. So providing we're below this figure and we are above this figure, we know we can capture all busts So I know if I'd have put 70 in there, I can just very quickly see if I had 70 on 190, it would crash on detect the bus on 18, and on 170 it will detect the bus on 18 as well, and it won't encroach into 17 because the balance there is 91. So guys, I hope you found that helpful. I hope that makes sense. If you have any questions, just reach out to me and I would do my best to answer the questions, but that is how I calculate out the bus threshold. Right, that ends the video, and I'll speak to you all again very, very soon.